Did Catelyn Stark know about Jon's true parents all along? This question is actually answered in the early pages of the first book of Game of Thrones. The quote I'm about to go through is pretty long, so if you don't have time to sit through one of my videos, the quick answer is no, she didn't know. In Chapter 6, Catelyn's second point of view chapter, Ned and Cat are figuring out whether or not he should become Robert's Hand of the King in King's Landing and where the children will go. "What of Jon Snow, my lord?" Maester Luwin asked. Catelyn tensed at the mention of the name. Ned felt the anger in her and pulled away. Many men father bastards. Catelyn had grown up with that knowledge. It came as no surprise to her in the first year of her marriage to learn that Ned had fathered a child on some girl chance met on campaign. He had a man's needs after all, and they had spent that year apart. Ned off at war in the south while she remained safe in her father's castle at Riverrun. Her thoughts were more of Robb, the infant at her breast, than of the husband she scarcely knew. He was welcome to whatever solace he might find between battles. And if his seat quickened, she expected he would see to the child's needs. He did more than that. The Starks were not like other men. Ned brought his bastard child home with him and called him son, for all the north to see. When the wars were over at last, and Catelyn rode to Winterfell, Jon and his wet nurse had already taken up residence. That cut deep. Ned would not speak of the mother, not so much as a word. But a castle has no secrets, and Catelyn heard her maids repeating tales they heard from the lips of her husband's soldiers. They whispered of Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, deadliest of the 7 knights of Aerys' Kingsguard, and of how their young lord had slain him in single combat. And they told how afterward Ned had carried Sir Arthur's sword back to the beautiful young sister who awaited him in a castle called Starfall on the shores of the Summer Sea. The Lady Ashara Dayne, tall and fair with haunting violet eyes. It had taken her a fortnight to marshal her courage, but finally in bed one night, Catelyn had asked her husband the truth of it, asked him to his face. That was the only time in all their years that Ned had ever frightened her. "Never ask me about Jon," he said, cold as ice. "He is my blood, and that is all you need to know. And now I will learn where you heard that name, my lady." She had pledged to obey, she told him, and from that day on, the whispering had stopped, and Ashara Dayne's name was never heard in Winterfell again. Whoever Jon's mother had been, Ned must have loved her fiercely, for nothing Cat said would persuade him to send the boy away. It was the one thing she could never forgive him. She had come to love her husband with all her heart, but she had never found it in her to love Jon. She might have overlooked a dozen bastards for Ned's sake, so long as they were out of sight. Jon was never out of sight, and as he grew, he looked more like Ned than any of her true-born sons she bore with him. Somehow that made it worse. Jon must go, she said now. So there's a lot to unpack from that passage. The whole part about Ashara Dayne being Jon's mother is a little hard to believe after all the hints of Jon's parents being Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. This is confirmed in the show, but it's still just something book fans almost universally believe. Ned did have this crush on Ashara Dayne, who he met during the tourney at Harrenhal, the same tourney where Lyanna met Rhaegar. Ned was always the shy Stark, while his older brother Brandon was more bold, so his big bro talked to Ashara Dayne for Ned and they ended up dancing. This was a huge public event filled with highborn lords and ladies, so this sparking a rumor is understandable. It's also true Ned returned Arthur Dayne's sword to Ashara after killing him at the Tower of Joy, and that she killed herself afterwards, which would only fuel the rumor. But again, it's pretty clear that Jon's parents are Lyanna and Rhaegar in the books, just like how they are in the show. But why wouldn't Ned tell the woman he loved and trusted the most, knowing it was the biggest conflict of their marriage? Why he didn't tell her in the early years is obvious. They literally met on their wedding day at Riverrun. This was just a politically arranged marriage at first, like most highborn betrothals. Ned's older brother Brandon was supposed to marry Catelyn, a pairing she was happy with because of his powerful position made a great match. After his tragic death, Ned would need this marriage if the Riverlands would be their ally in the rebellion against the Mad King. So they got married, and Ned impregnated her that night, and then he was off back to the war. The next time they saw each other, Robb was born and Jon was too. Ned had to bring Jon to Winterfell because it was the safest place to raise him. If somehow the truth got out, many would want Jon dead, just like how Robert Baratheon and many others wanted Daenerys killed for being a Targaryen that could challenge his reign. The north is extremely difficult to invade since the border is a dangerous swamp, if anyone was brave enough to come after them. Behind the walls of Winterfell only made him safer. Ned's bannermen were loyal enough to answer his call to protect Jon if the time came, but it's not like he had many other options to take him since his real parents were dead. In the books, Lyanna does ask Ned to promise her something that isn't revealed yet, so it could also be that Ned is just honoring her last wishes of raising him as his own bastard so he can live a decent life. This explains why Ned brought Jon home and didn't tell Cat when he was getting to know her. But what about those 14 years of living together? He surely didn't want to take any chances on the slim chance that Catelyn betrays him and starts talking. But I think it's because Catelyn has proven to easily break when it comes to her children. She would fork over the information about Jon if it meant helping out her kids. Just look at how quickly she released Jaime Lannister without even knowing if he would keep his promise of returning her daughters. The Lannisters lied about having Arya as a hostage and would have never let Sansa go. Why would they if she was crazy enough to let Jaime go? That's not how Tywin, Cersei, and Joffrey operate. She also irrationally had Tyrion Lannister arrested for a crime he didn't even commit, so she isn't the best decision maker. She acts based on her emotions, and Ned must have known this. With Ned dead, the only other person to know this secret is Tywin Reed. From everything we've heard about him, he seems a lot more trustworthy than Catelyn ever was. After Ned's death, Catelyn thinks about Jon's mother again in the second book, A Clash of Kings. This is a quote from chapter 45, Catelyn's 6th point of view chapter in this book. She found herself thinking of Jon's mother, that shadowy secret love her husband would never speak of. Does she grieve for Ned as I do? Or did she hate him for leaving her bed for mine? Does she pray for her son as I prayed for mine? They were uncomfortable thoughts and futile. If Jon had been born of a Shara Dane of Starfall, as some whispered, the lady was long dead. If not, Catelyn had no clue who or where his mother might be, and it made no matter, and his loves and his secrets all dead with him. It's a good thing she doesn't know that all his secrets didn't actually die with him. If she knew how much Tywin Reed knew, she would probably be after the information in her resurrected Lady Stoneheart persona. That's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys later.